Well, welcome everybody. We're glad that you made it out to hear Gene's oral history. We have some events coming up I want you aware of. On November 8th, we have the Battle Creek, Lightning of Battle Creek, and that's going to be over at the Senior Center. On November 12th, we have Dr. Franz for an oral history. Well, you can come for dinner, or you can wait until 1 o'clock. So, and it will be in the paper, and I'll advertise it on Facebook as well.
Cindy, will that be at 1 o'clock too, you said?
Yes, or you can come for lunch. The Battle of Lightning Creek.
No,
Dr. Franz, that's going to be at 1 o'clock.
Here.
No, it will be at the Senior Center.
Sorry.
Okay. And so that's something new that we've added, so I wanted you all aware of that.
What was the second one? And then I interrupted you.
Oh, that's okay. Dr. Franz.
Oh, he's going to do it?
He's going to do it.
When?
On November 12th. At 1 o'clock at the Senior Center.
Oh, wow.
And he's gonna do what on?
Oral history, talk about the medical field and his life.
Oh, okay, cool.
Oh, man, I gotta go to that.
So yeah, he has a lot of experience.
He didn't know you were going to do that.
Sure. Oh, and we have something coming up. On October 25th, we have the Weston County Preservation Board. They're going to have a free dinner, and that's going to be at the Senior Center. The program starts at 5, dinner at 6. And, I always have an and, we have on October 26th, we have our cemetery walk. Nothing scary. What we're doing is we're going to talk about some characters in the community. Lucas is going to talk about Fred Coates and Frank Fawcett. We're going to talk about a gentleman from Osage, and his name, I just lost it. Apostle is his last name. We have some other people as well. So if you can make it, that's at 5:30 on October 26th, and we're going to meet at the Anna Miller Museum, walk up to the cemetery. Or if it's cold, we can drive. So now, after we got all of our bookkeeping things done, I'd like Walter to tell you where you can find these oral histories on the newsletter journal.
If you go to YouTube and just type in newsletter journal, it'll bring up our own page, and all of these are on there, even the ones from the past for a while. I also wanted to thank anybody who has gone on to our newsletter journal page and watched videos. Within a year, we went from barely any views at all. This last week, we just went over 10,000 views. Wow. We went from 2 or 3 subscribers. We are pushing at 100 right now within a year. And in a community of this size, I just think that's fantastic. And y'all are to thank for that. I really appreciate it. If you can't get onto YouTube or don't like going to YouTube, you can always go to Facebook, find my page. Look up Walter Sprague or Walter Doodles. That should bring you right to my page. These are also posted on there once I have them done. And this should be done tonight. So anyway, thank you.
Thank you, Walter. So with that, we are so excited to have you here.
Well, I'd like to thank you all for coming here this afternoon to hear poor old me talk, but I appreciate it. And it all started a couple, 3 weeks ago when I called the museum and talked to good old Cindy about what this goes on here and how to get organized, you know. Well, I probably may have missed the call because it's not very well organized, I don't think. But we'll suffer through it anyway. Now, Cindy said, well, just tell them about life on the ranch. Well, I guess I could do that because I was there, you know. Now, before we start, let's make a deal. If you get done listening before I get done talking, raise your hand. Now, I thought that ought to be pretty good. It ought to be a lot easier than trying to select a speaker for the House of Representatives. Well, I'll tell you how the life was on the ranch. For me, it was lonesome. It was doggone lonesome. And through this little visit, I'll explain why. Now, it all began with me down in Nebraska, Inez, Nebraska. That's where I was born. And Inez, as Michael found out on his cell phone, nowadays is just a crossroads, a cross place in the road. But those days, it might have had a post office, it might have had a store, it did have some houses around it. I suppose people that worked the land lived there. Anyway, I want to tell you, I don't have a birth certificate, but I do have this.
Is that proof you were born?
Now, this young fella sitting in the picture, see, he's pretty near as good looking as I am. Now, but the interesting thing about it is, right here on this boot, it says Gene, 1926. So that's about the only way I've got to say that I'm here. You see, now, this is probably, do you think it's too difficult to pass this around if you'd like to look at it? Probably. I think I saw a show of hands.
I'd like to look at it. Yeah, I would.
Okay. Now, my family was made up of my father, R.W. Baldwin, and his wife, Daisy Baldwin, and two brothers, Robert and Donald. And I was an afterthought, perhaps. My brothers were 11 years older than I was. So, who did I have to play with? Nobody. Eh? Well, now the brothers were pretty good brothers to me. They were in high school when I was a youngster out there. And we used to play a game of kickball with a football or with a baseball. And the rules were, we played in a big yard in front of the house. And the yardage between the ends of the yard, probably 100 yards maybe. Fence at this end, fence but a gate in the other. Now the idea of the game was, you kick the football and try to kick it by your opponent to gain yardage so you could kick that sucker over his fence and you beat him, see? Now, if you caught the ball on the fly, you could take 3 big jumping steps to give you that much more yardage. Well, we had a lot of fun, or I did, playing with this game. But you know, I never did win. So I pouted, see? And when I pouted, why, I'd get even with them. I'd leave that football out in the middle of the yard. That'll take care of it. Well, now, my dad was a young feller, of course, and he went to school, they tell me. Now, I ought to say, before we go any further, most of this is just hearsay. See? Hearsay, because a fella 2 or 3 months old has got 3 or 4 things that he gotta do instead of taking ideas of where he is and what's going on. Well, anyway, my dad was going to school at Creighton. Now, I don't know what he was going to study. Didn't matter, he didn't last very long. But anyway, while he was there, he met a man by the name of Preston T. McAvoy. You remember Preston T. McAvoy? Sure. The ironical thing about it is that Preston T. McAvoy apparently got his law degree because he came here to practice law. My dad didn't get his degree because, so the story says, he dropped a water balloon on one of the officials of the university, and he was out. Now, Mr. McAvoy, you know, he had his office on the corner just across from the Leonard Cash's store. He had a corner room, best you could get, you know. And you remember we had a big clock on that corner.
Yeah.
Seems like it had a green face to it, and you could see it for 3 or 4 different directions. And so Mr. McAvoy married, and he had a family. He had 2 daughters, and their names were Merle, whose name was really, nickname was Bunny, and he had a daughter whose name was Dorothy Ann, and her name was Mickey. Now that was a girl that got me into a whole lot of trouble. Now wait a minute, I know what you're thinking, And I'll tell you what happened a little bit later. But it's not that, I'll tell you all the gruesome details. Anyway, McAvoy's came back to live in Newcastle. They got to be lifelong friends of my family. Let's see, you got another chair?
Yep.
So, they moved here, and then the folks moved here. Now, the next thing was moving to the ranch from Nebraska. Hearsay, I don't know how or why or what happened, but we did. Could I sit down for a while?
Yes.
Thank you, Michael, for this. You see, my grandpa, Baldwin, owned a bank in Elkhorn, Nebraska. And it seems to me that he probably put up the money to buy this place we live on today. At any rate, they must have come to this country and looked it over. Maybe the ranch was for sale. Maybe Grandpa could afford to pay for it. And so we moved out here. Now that would have been in 1926, before the first of the year. So what did we move into? Well, it's still there if you want to go take a look. It's not as good a shape as it was when we moved out of it, however. But it was a log house, and it had been built there many years before. Now, hearsay has it that our neighbor, whose name was Fred Fawcett, he had a ranch about, 6 miles up north of us, and he told us that ranch house was a stopover for cowboys that were riding herd on the cattle that were left up here. Apparently they trailed them up from Texas or Kansas or wherever and just turned them loose. And he said to my folks, I guess, that they had a camp for the cowboys about every 12 or 15 miles. Now, why they would be riding for cattle that way, of course, they were all loose, free running, there were no fences, nothing. The only thing I can think of they might check is Beaver Creek runs through our ranch, Stockade Beaver. And the headwaters of Stockade Beaver are up above Mallow Creek, about a mile or so. There's a dam up there. And this big stream runs down through our place and it finally winds its way into the Cheyenne River, I do believe.
Yep.
Well, the old house, as I can remember it, when I was, say, 21 years old, no, when I was 6 years old or so, had an entryway facing the south. And you walk in the entryway and there was a small room there. And I can remember seeing rough plank on the floor, and you could see through between the planks and see the dirt down there. Then you would go into another room, and that was the kitchen. And the thing that was in the kitchen was a big old wood-burning cook stove. And it had a reservoir on it, which was to heat water for washing dishes and for taking baths, if you will. The next room was a large dining room, what it turned out to be. Then there was a large front room. And to the right of the bedroom was a small bedroom, and the bathroom. What was in the bathroom? Nothing but a bathtub, of course. The bathtub had 4 little legs on it, holding apparently to the side of the corners of the thing, see? Then from the bathroom there was a alleyway, and it went to another bedroom at the end of the house. And the the hallway also offered a door outside. To the east of the hallway were two big bedrooms. So that was how the house looked when we got there. Incidentally, we had air conditioning in those days. Well, we did too.
Windows, huh?
You open the windows, you see. But, you know, they had made screens for all the windows of that house. And in the summer, we'd nail those screens up to every window in the house, and there were quite a few of them. And in the fall, you'd go take them down, put them in the milk house, and put up storm windows. And so, we pretty well had it made, didn't we? The old house. My mother fixed that old house up. You can't believe it. She did work hard on it. In the summer, when she wasn't cooking for hired men and doing their laundry and taking care of me, she'd paint those rooms. She'd wallpaper the rooms that needed it. And I remember about the front room. Mother wanted hardwood floors. Hardwood floors, those were the thing of the day, I guess. So, we happened to know a fella that was a carpenter and was out of a job. He said, I'll put those hardwood floors in for you. And by golly, he did, you know, little narrow strips like that. And so Mother got her hardwood floors. Do you know what the first thing she did after she got the hardwood floors? Put a nice carpet over it. Oh, goodness me. So that pretty well takes care of the old house except for heat. The heat was supplied by the kitchen stove, wood stove, and there was a stove in the dining room. That's all. That heated the whole thing. At night, we go back, my brother and I slept in the back bedroom back there, and my grandmother would come from David City, Nebraska to spend the summer with us, and she would spend the summer making quilts, you know. Any of you ladies ever made a quilt? Yes, about that thick? You betcha. And she'd make 2 or 3 of those in the summertime, and they were greatly appreciated when we crawled in our underwear into that cold bed, you know. Now, Mother made the bed more comfortable because she had a stone about that big, and she put that sucker in her oven in the morning and heat it up, and when it was time to go to bed, she wrapped some paper, red paper around it, and stuffed it under the quilts. And man, you could get in and hop into that bed and get your feet. My brother had big feet, so he thought, but it was warm down by there, really. So that's the way that went. Now let me see. We used lanterns, kerosene lanterns, you know. Nowadays you take them camping, don't you? And we used lamps with big chimneys on them, kerosene. I imagine it was 3 cents a gallon? refinery'd never make it on that, would they? Okay, so that's what we had, but my dad was a forward-looking fellow, I guess, because after we'd been there a while, he bought a gas-powered generator, and we put it in the cellar. Somebody had dug a kind of a cave back into a steep bank. He put this generator in there and strung wires up to the house, the bunkhouse, and the shop, and the hired man's house. And so, while other people were using their lanterns and deals, we flipped that old light and we had light. Trouble was, it was 32 volt, not what, 125, whatever, was 32 volt. And that just crushed me to death, because I wanted in the worst way to have an electric train. Oh, yes, I did. Well, I got a wind-up train, but that ran out of wind-up after a little bit. And do you know, the folks tried everything they could to make the 32 volt produce 110 volts. Now, can they do that now, Michael?
Oh, I bet they can.
Darn. Well, now let me see, where am I here? I told you about the kickball. The ranch house was located about, 100 yards between the barn and the house, and the fence around the house to keep the cows out. And that's where we played the kickball that I told you about. Had a yard. Mother tried to grow flowers there, and I had the MW water hauling service. I had a little red wagon, and some hired man had printed MWWS on it. And I was a big deal. I could go down to the creek, get the bucket, fill it full of water, take it up to water the flowers. 5-gallon bucket probably had that much in it when I got it.
That's a steep climb.
Oh, fool. Well, let me tell you a little bit now. Are you tired yet?
No.
All right, let me tell you a little bit about how the ranch operated. It was a cow ranch, of course, and at one time my dad ran 1,000 head of cows. That's a lot of cows, I'll tell you, especially when you go to Brandon and vaccinating, taking care of the sick calves. Well, he ran those 1,000 cows, and the old timers used to say it'd take 40 acres of grass if you ran a cow a year on your place. Scott, you agree with that?
Yep.
About 40 acres. So, I don't know, the ranch nowadays I think has about 18,000 acres in the valley. But that won't run 1,000 cows very long, will it? I'm not very good at arithmetic, but I think I understand that. So what did he do? Well, we put up hay, and we did that all summer. Now my dad had 2 irrigators. First I better tell you about the irrigation system. As I said before, Stockade Beaver Creek runs through the place, and it's at the north end of the ranch. And the land, fortunately, where the ditch runs into meeting the creek is downhill. So what happened was they built a ditch that runs from where the creek meets the ranch down to a lake we had down there. I imagine that ditch runs what, Michael, 4 miles?
Yeah, at least.
Okay, 4 miles, then it runs into a ditch, the lake, I'm sorry. So Dad had 2 irrigators that start in May, maybe, and start irrigating up north, and he had a guy that lived down in an old house below the lake, and he'd start irrigating down there. And the valley was all alfalfa. It was sure pretty in the summer when it did bloom. It was just all purple down through that valley. So now how did we irrigate? Well, you go up to where the ditch meets the creek, and we put in a big head gate. And to shut it off, it cut planks and jam them down in there to keep the creek from running where it should. And that'd turn the water. The water probably had to raise 2 feet, 3 feet, maybe, if there were quite a little in the creek. And down she'd come. Well, to irrigate the first field, you'd go to where there was a culvert and a head gate. Put some boards in the head gate and open the culvert that came out into a spreader ditch, see? Turn the water out there, the water runs to the south. The irrigator would take what's called a canvas. You can buy canvas in a big roll, and it has a thing sewed in the top so you can stick a 2x4 through it, see? So you get yourself a 2x4, and canvas is maybe 6 feet, depending on how wide the ditch was, but 6 feet. So you put the canvas in there, and then they'd nail a board like that to hold the canvas in place, and they'd cut a notch in the board because to keep the canvas from running under the 2x4, they put a 2x4 down through there, or a board of some kind, and they had a block nailed at the end of the canvas, so there was an edge for each end of the board to hold the canvas straight. Otherwise, you had to shovel a whole bunch of dirt on the bottom of the canvas to keep it from washing out under there when you try and do something. See? Okay, now some people say, man, that's a waste of water irrigating like that. Well, probably it is, but we didn't waste any because we used the same head of water 3 times before it got away from us. And when it did get away from us, it ran into the creek, ran on down the creek to the next guy that was trying to irrigate, you see? So, you'd turn it out of the main ditch into the lateral, you'd go down in front of it, put another canvas in, turn her out, maybe there'd be another lateral that'd run down to it, put a canvas. You could irrigate a whole lot of ground in one setting. It takes a good irrigator to know, anybody that's played golf, you get up there and you survey the green to try to see which way it's going to slope. Well, the irrigator did the same thing. His eye would say, hey, there's a hill right here. Not very big one, but a hill. How do I get the water on it? Well, maybe go up a little ahead of it. Turn it out, the flow will take it down there and it'll spread out over that hill. Michael was a pretty good irrigator. He was, yes sir,
Did you flash any alfalfa seed?
yes. He sure
Did you have
did.
your own machine or somebody come in and do it?
Yeah, well, best irrigator we had though was Michael's son, Patrick. Really, when he was in high school, he came and helped me all summer. And one of his jobs was to irrigate. And he was pretty good at it, really. He had the eye for it. And I think he liked to do it, even though we didn't pay him very much. But while we're on Michael's family, his daughter Stephanie worked for me during the summer when she was in high school. And she was the best prairie dog eliminator. You betcha. We turned her loose with the four-wheeler and a bomb to put in the prairie dog hole. You put the bomb in there, you put some paper out. You guys know how you do it. And throw some dirt on it, poof, and hopefully that takes care of them. But you know, the good government and their good way of thinking say, hey, wait just a minute, boys, you can't do this. Why not? Because you're killing all the little ones. Yeah, killing all the little ones. Well, anyway, that's the way that went, and that's the way the irrigating went. And we'd usually put up 3 cuttings of hay in the summer, unless it was terrible drought. And you know, there's been a lot of droughts around here, and not for just a year or two. Some of them last 10 years. I learned that the hard way. I've got a good friend, his name's Jay Tisdale, and he's a good farmer and a rancher up on the prairie up there. And so the alfalfa had been in there for 30 or 40 years and was beginning to kill out. And I got with Jay and I said, hey, you know how to do this. How about we get together and make a partnership and we'll raise some alfalfa. Oh, he thought that was a fine idea. So he brought his big tractor down there and a plow, and we bought some equipment, a land leveler and some harrows and things, and we got started. And Jay got his big tractor, boy, the smoke was going everywhere, I'll tell you. And we plowed that baby up for quite a few acres, and we leveled it, and then we planted it. And he said, now, tell you what, we'll use our oats for seed to start the alfalfa. And we had some alfalfa seed that we thrashed a year or two before. We took it to Rapid City, we had it cleaned, we had it bagged. You know, we couldn't sell it for 30 cents a pound. Not a bit, no sir. So, well, okay, let's use it. We'll just plant it here. Now, a lot of people say, well, you got to put quite a few seeds in there, maybe 10 or 12 seeds. But Jay said, no. He said, let's just put 8 seeds in. I think if half of them grow, that'll make a good crop. So we did. you know what? None of them grew because it was so darn dry.
And when we make a public records request and are told by a county clerk that they have to retrieve it from the vault and it's going to take 30 days, that absolutely should never ever be said to anybody.
Right. And why does it take however long to get the minutes put up on there so people can actually see the minutes, when in today's technology, it's as quick as, you copy it, you paste it on there, and you're done. It's really the update of our website. There's a lot of things that I said it in the city council meeting just a couple days ago. All of us as commissioners and city council members, in the past, they have kicked these problems down the road, and I can list 5 right off the top. The good doctor during COVID, dispatch, the contracts with dispatch, the costs that are incurred when it comes to these Title 25s. The hospitals asked for solutions for these things.
None of them grew because it was so darn dry. And I mean, it was dry for 10 years. And he lost his oats. We lost our alfalfa seed, which wasn't worth anything anyway, I guess. And so now we don't have any alfalfa anymore. Donna, who is in charge of the herd out there, she's a believer in grazing. Fine idea if you got grass. Fine idea if it doesn't snow 3 foot and stay on for 2 or 3 months. So we haven't tried to redo any alfalfa. I learned plenty about gardening then. Anyway, I didn't care for any more of that. It's too bad though. That old hay, what, $300 a ton? Well, gee whiz, what do you do? Well, let's see what's next. Haying. Cows to the cow camp. You want to go for a ride to the cow camp? All right. We have a forest permit up on the Black Hills National Forest, if you know where Moon, South Dakota is. It's about 3, 4, 5 miles, the headquarters, north of Moon. So we drive those cows and calves up there. It's 32 miles from the ranch house to the cow camp. But we don't go that way, we cut across. So what we do before we're gonna go is we get all the cattle that we are gonna put on the permit, put them as far up north in our place as we could get them. And the night before, we'd get our shaps and we'd oil them up. We'd use suet, I guess, is that right? Suet melt and make oil our boots and oil that up. And we'd get up at 3 o'clock in the morning and have breakfast. There were about 5 people, 5 cowboys with the herd. And we'd get up at 3 o'clock and eat, and saddle the horses, and away we'd go. We'd gather these cows and put them out on the road. Now the road was Highway 85. And we were pleased to tell everybody that 85 went from Canada clear to Mexico. Big deal, yay boy. So, we got up one time at 3 o'clock and we got our breakfast. We gathered up the cows, we put them on the road, and man, we were making good going. Calves were staying pretty good with the cows. Cows were kind of grazing along, and then all of a sudden hell broke loose. Really. Heel flies hit the cows and the calves. Now, heel fly, if you're not know about are little flies about like that, and apparently they're about built like a bullet. Boom. And so they fly and they hit the cow and the calf just above the hoof in the hock there. Well, that disturbs the cows greatly, and the calves more so. So what do the calves want to do? Go back to where they last sucked, at the pasture we just got them out of a couple hours ago. So the next morning we got up at 3 o'clock, ate our breakfast, gathered the cows, we put them on the highway, started down the road. You know what, the same thing happened about an hour and a half later.
Oh,
Calves went right down. So the third day, we got up there, we put the cows and the calves on the highway, and my dad said, if we ever get these damn cows on the cow calf, I'm gonna sell every one of them. And you know, he did. He did. And we began running yearlings at that time. Sure, and that was a lot more fun and easier than fooling with those old girls, I'll tell you. Now, there was Barbara, there was a problem with driving yearlings too. Some of them walk a lot faster than others. And so you gotta have at least 2 people, one at the back to keep the drag coming, and one at the front to keep the other guys from walking away from the back. Well, we finally got up there and had a good year, I guess, and the old cows went bye-bye, and we started buying calves from our neighbors. We had an old international truck, and my dad would go around the neighbors' calves or try to buy them. And boy, they were expensive. I'll tell you what, you think beefsteak's high now. It was really high then. A good 400-pound steer calf brought 20 cents a pound, mind you. $400 for a 400-pound calf. Well, I was in the hauling business. We had a 2-ton truck with a rack on it. Excuse me. And my dad had bought some calves, 10 or 12, I guess, from a rancher that lived up on Salt Creek. And he said, you go up there and pick up the calves. Okay, I wheeled that old truck up there, and he had a chute, and he had the calves in, a neighbor there to help him. We put them in the truck, and the neighbor said, well, now, you know, this fella's got a calf, but he's kind of sick. Would you buy him for the rest of them? Well, we'd had a lot of sick calves and had pretty good luck. I've had a doctor, and so I said, yeah, load him, well, I'll take him home. And of course, those days, what? We had penicillin, maybe, believe so, was about the only treatment. But you know, I think that old calf got well in spite of everything. And so that's how we got the cows to the cow camp. Now, let me tell you why I'm so smart. I'll relate to you my schooling. And that first statement was plumb false. Well, I went to school, country school, at a place called Clifton. Maybe you've heard of Clifton. It had a house for the depot agents. It had a house for the depot business. It had a water well, which was 40% water and 60% iron pyrite. It was good water, but it turned your underwear red. It had a well, and it had a thing to give water, put water in locomotives. And that water tower stands today a few miles south of Newcastle, 2 or 3, where the old packing plant
Yep.
used to be, remember? Well, they used that water to wash the cows, the beef off. But it turned the beef redder than the beef was red already. So that was one drawback to the power, to the beef packers there. So I went to school at Clifton over there. And there were about 12 of us on a good day. There was the Carr family that lived south of us, about 7 miles. There were 3 children there. There were Bobby and Francis and Mary. And then they came up to the highway to me and went on up the road about 3 or 4 miles to a section hand. Marriage was his name. Marriage. I can't recall exactly, but he had 2 girls, and I do remember that they sure loved garlic. Now, we had a bus, mind you, we had a bus. It was a pickup truck, and the bus driver, whose name was Jim Berg, lived in the house that our grandpa built on part of the ranch. He was the bus driver, and he took some plywood and made sides and put a top on it, and he cut the front of the plywood out so the heat from the heater, which there wasn't very much, would come through, and he put some kind of clothing over the space between the head of the box of the pickup and the cab. And he cut little windows in the side and put a couple of slides there so he could put a piece of glass in it, and put a door in the back, and you couldn't get out if you got in the bus. You were going to school no matter what. Now, one time he took trouble. He thought nicely of us. You know, he cut a hole in the bed of his pickup box, and he ran a pipe from the exhaust up through into the box of the pickup. There was a pipe about that long where you could put your old shoes on and burn a hole in them, you know? And then back down and out. So that was pretty good living like that. Now, the old schoolhouse over there was a regular old-time schoolhouse like you've seen along the highways. It was one large room, and on the outside had a porch with a roof over the porch, and then a door, and you came into a little anteroom, and inside that was a place to put your galoshes and a table, little table for a bucket and a dipper with a handle on it where you could get a drink of water, see? Then you'd go in and the teacher had a big old desk right in front of the door, and on the desk she had a bell, much like the bells that our bell choir ring, you know? And only the bell on it was about that long and kind of copper color. And she'd come out on the porch, ring that bell, and of course everybody track in to school. Then there were desks. Now for 12 kids didn't take many desks, did it? But about 4 rows. And the desks, the people in the desk were seated by their grade. The first grade kids all sat together, and the second grade, and so on. And also on her desk was a phone, and not a phone, was a bell with a deal sticking up, and she could clang that bell and say, "Third grade reading." And so all the third graders would get their reader out, and we'd have third grade reading. Now the rest of the kids, being very studious students, went right on with their reading and arithmetic, you know. So one of the big things about going to school there, in the middle of the room, they had a great big old red stove. And it was fed by a coal, by golly. We had a coal house and a coal bucket, and somebody bring in a bucket of coal and run that stove. And in the morning, and you get off the bus, pretty nice in the schoolhouse, see? Now, one thing that we had to do was get water to drink. And sometimes the teacher would let 2 of us take the 5-gallon bucket and walk down the hill to the depot and get a bucket of water and bring it back up and put it on the shelf so you could have a drink if you want. Well, it was the same situation. 2 kids carrying the 5-gallon bucket about that much mainly up there. But it was fun to go to school. We'd play fox and geese in the snow. You ever play fox and geese in the snow? You'd make a big circle like that, and you make a circle in the middle, and then you make paths to the circles. Now you couldn't jump from one circle to the other. That was no good. The guy that was the fox chased the geese. But you couldn't jump from one circle to the other. And so we'd spend the time running around this circle trying to catch some kid. We played kick the can. We played hide and seek. We played pum pum pull away. You ever played pum pum pull away? Sure enough, you old fellas have. You remember there'd be 2 goals. Maybe, 15, 20 yards apart? Absolutely. And one kid was it. And the rest of them would sit on one side or the other and try to run across to the other side. If you were over here, you had to go over there. And the kid that was it would come up to you and say, "Pum pum pull away, come or I'm gonna pull you away," right? Absolutely. So you had to get up and zip across this 20 yards or so before he could patch you 3 times, and you're it and help him. Oh, what fun.
Yeah.
We also had a flagpole, and by the way, the old schoolhouse is sitting on our property right by the old road. And I remember when I was in the first grade, my seat was right along the windows on the east side, and I was right in the first chair in the first row there. I think that was so the teacher could whack me easier with a ruler, but I don't know. Hey, how are we coming along? What time is it, Barbara?
Two, almost 2.
Huh?
Almost 2 o'clock. Almost.
I'm windier than I thought.
Go right ahead.
Hey, but I gotta tell you, I got graduated from school in the country, and I went to school here in Newcastle in the 3rd grade because my folks thought that the teacher they hired for the Clifton school was just no good. And so they sent me to school in town here in the 3rd grade.
How'd you get there?
Pardon?
How did you get there?
Bus. Johnny Keeler drove the bus. Anybody remember Johnny Keeler?
Yes, my grandpa. So this is Gene's best story. I'm glad you're going to remember it. I was going to remind you to tell the Johnny Keeler story.
Sure, everybody remembers Lucas and those fine things he teaches us about the canyon down there. Anyway, now, think back. This is where I told you about that girl that got me into all that trouble, see? Are you still awake?
Yeah. We are now.
Rose, you better take him out. Anyway, I went to school at the old school, on the hill. Remember? Big old school, and had a bell on the top of it, and the bell had a big rope that hung down, must have been that big around, and the kids could pull that rope to ring the bell, but it was funny, it was only the girls that got to pull the rope. Boys never did, I suppose. They figured they'd tear it down or something. But anyway, I tell you, it was in the winter time, and it was cold out, and so for recess, everybody put a coat and a hat on, and the school at that time sat at the top of the hill, and then down a little further, they had flattened a place for the kids to play on. And let's see, I guess that was it. And so sometimes the kids would run off of where they were supposed to be and run down to the old schoolhouse down there. So the edict came out one day, grade school people will stay on their own level, the first level down, play there. Well, we had recess, and this girl, Dorothy Ann, Mickey, came out, and she had on a real nice white bonnet, a knit cap-like thing, see? Was very pretty. And there was a fella that was maybe a grade or two ahead of us, named Billy Bolden. Billy Bolden. Well, sir, you know what that cat did? As quick as Mickey got down there, he ran up and snatched her hat off of her. Now, I had a good friend. His name was George Edwards, and his dad helped build the first power plant in Newcastle, which is just across the railroad on the right side. But Billy grabbed this girl's hat and took off. Now, George Edwards, about like I was, rambunctious and so on and so forth. And we took off right after him. And so where did he go? Right down to the school, the high school. And of course, we zipped right after him. Well, that word got around through the kids that, hey, they went down to the high school. And so as quick as we got back to the school and class, the teacher said, now, you people that were down at the high school will remain in school after it's let out. Okay, we did. So school ended, and George Edwards and I and Billy Bolden sat there. And teacher went out, and I don't know what they did, had a cup of coffee, I suppose, whatever, but finally, she came back and said, George, you go find a stick.
Uh-oh.
So George left to find a stick. And he found a stick about that long. So the teacher said, well, I'll just use this ruler because you're going to be punished for your trouble you made. And I said, ma'am, I got to tell you something. My mother's waiting down there in a car. I've got a music lesson. And so Miss Hathaway, who was our third grade teacher, said, well, that's fine. You're excused. Go ahead. Boy, I was out of there like a shot. Got in the car with Mom and she started driving. Finally, she said, Gene, what's the matter? Well, I wasn't rattling off like I do. You know? And I said, well, we got in trouble and we're supposed to get thumped. But I got to take this music lesson, and so she let me out. Mom said, she stopped the car and she said, you know what? You better go back up there, because if you don't, she's gonna whack you in front of the whole class. Didn't take much thinking to find out that it was time to go. So I went up, and they hadn't issued the punishment yet. But when I got there, the teacher said, all right, Billy, you come up here and bend over this chair. So he went up, bent over, and she had this ruler. Whack, whack, whack. So then she said, Gene, you were next, you come. So I went up and sat there, whack, whack, whack. And that didn't hurt. So I got up and started out, and she said, George, it's your turn. So he came up, bent over, and she whacked him. He looked up and laughed at her. Oh. And the second three changed his mind. Hey, we've been at this too long, guys. I appreciate your help. You being here, and I'm sorry I rattled off so long, but could I do one more thing? Is it okay? Are you plumb tired out?
No.
I'd like to tell you about a rodeo in Newcastle. We used to be quite a rodeo town in the 50s, see? And do you know that those rodeos, on a Saturday and a Sunday, the grandstands were nearly everyone full. And the reason was because all the guys that were in the rodeo were local hands. They brought their best ponies and maybe a new lasso to see how good the other guys were, you know. Now, back in the 50s, you know what? Miss Rodeo America came to Newcastle. She sure did, right here in person. And I was standing down at the arena looking through the gate, and this pretty girl rides this fancy horse. And I don't know whether she trailered it in here or whether she got it from Bill Engel.
It was Vi Sedgwick's horse.
What?
Vi Sedgwick's horse, that Palomino.
Big Palomino horse. Yeah, it had a fancy breast collar on it and a fancy saddle. And this beautiful girl came riding up to me. And do you know, she spoke directly to me. She looked at me with those big blue eyes, and she said to me, "Get out of the way." Well, you can laugh if you want to, but how many of you have been directly by Miss Rodeo Now, one more thing before we get out here. Can I recite a poem for you?
Absolutely.
Have everybody here seen a barrel race?
No.
Anybody that has not seen a barrel race? Okay, so you know how it goes then. Well, here's how this poem goes. Let me see if I can remember it. I was hanging around the arena with my good old black horse Slim, waiting for an event that we could enter in. Well, some fellers brought some barrels out, put them all in place, and the announcer said, "And now, folks, it's the ladies' barrel race." Well, the ladies got to racing, and I laughed till I was crying, because it seemed so funny seeing ponytails a-flying, you know. Well, when the race was over, this gal steps up to me. She said, "Well, what's so funny? I'll bet you can't beat me." And then she looked me over and she said with a little grin, "Just put up $50 and we'll let you in." "Oh," says I, "you've lost your race, why, as anyone can see, with those fine legs and muscles, old Slim will outrun Mercury. And talk about your cutting, in my mind there is no doubt old Slim's the best. Why, I've seen him turn an old cow inside out." Well, Slim and I got to the line and both of us are feeling fine. And then we're off in a cloud of dust. It's win this race or we'll go bust. Take the first barrel to your right. Old Slim's running with all his might. Around that barrel and on to the next. Old Slim's running like he's been hexed. Around that barrel, on to the point. Old Slim's running on every joint. He's flying along, and well, I guess he'd fast outrun a fast express. Around the point, now we're heading home, and old Slim's a breathing white. frothy foam, and to let him know what's on my mind, I'm whacking him on his black behind, across the finish with a terrible rush, and over the crowd there falls a hush. The announcer said, with style and grace, "You've won! Last place." Hey, guys.
I tell you what, I hope the rest of my years I remember you, and I'm glad to be in the family.
Well, I'm sorry you didn't get to look at the pictures if you want to see some of them. Okay, shall I send them around? Okay. Here's the cowhands gather. Now send this around. Will you get them, Michael, on the road?
Yes.
And here's a cowboy saddle up during the roundup. These are Charlie Carr's ranch. And now don't be looking at it too long, Michael.
Hey, Gene. Hey, Gene. Gene,
Give him.
here. What kind of honors did you win at the cow camp?
Oh! Well, yes.
Oh, you got a
But I
picture?
ran out of time. You know, at the cow camp, the rule was that the cowboys did everything except cook. And all the cook had to do was cook. So they had to do the dishes, they had to carry water, they had to cut and chop and haul in wood for the stove. Well, they had to gather the horses, of course, every morning at 5:30. Well, I didn't really want to get up at 5:30 and go tromping through the forest on a horse. So I thought, hey, what I'll do is do the dishes. I'll help with the dishes. So I did. And I got to be a pretty good dishwasher, really. And dry the dishes. And before we left camp that year, Mary Fawcett, was our cook. She was a dandy. She really was. We had 2 kinds of pie every night for supper. Mighty good pie. And every night after the dishes were off, a big penny ante game. And it really was penny ante. You bet a dime and somebody will be looking right at you. Anyway, it got to be where we were all ready to go down and trail the cows to the depot, the stockyards, and load them on the train and go to South Omaha with them. And I'd like to tell you about how that trip was riding on that stock train, but that's 2 days more. But anyway, Mary Capps presented me with this trophy. It says Roundup Washing Champion, 1950. Now, the interesting thing about this is that this towel right here was hanging by the wash basin at the cow camp, and it had never been washed Six wheels was in 1950. That's the real thing. But no, I wore this badge all the way to Newcastle, trailing the cows. I wore it all the way on the train as we went to Omaha. And I'd get off of the train. We stopped in Alliance, Nebraska at 5 o'clock in the morning, and the guy said, well, we'll be here. You guys can go up to the hotel on the hill, and you can wash up and then get a bite to eat. And so I'm walking in like this, and I know. People thought I was a little goose. Would you like to get a close-up?
In addition to the weekly printed version of the newsletter journal, we also promote our community and share important information on our award-winning website, newslj.com, and in our weekly email newsletter, Nuke Now. We also connect with readers through various social media platforms and invite you to check us out on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. You can even take a look at a recent meeting of the City Council, School Board, or County Commission on our YouTube channel. We do hope that you will go to newslj.com and subscribe today, and we look forward to making all of our great content available to you. But regardless of your level of support, we thank you from the bottom of our hearts for doing your part to preserve a free and independent local press.
I think.
Okay.
Can I request, Gene has this poem, I don't know if he'll do it for you, but it's called Nervous Twitch.
The what now?
The Nervous Twitch.
Poem.
Oh,
Poem.
Do you remember it? Maybe, I don't want to put you on the spot, but
if I can think of it.
if you can't, that's fine, but a rancher starts out with a nervous twitch and he ends with a nervous twitch.
Can't recall that one, thankfully.
Shoot.
I seen it and it was good.
You can do the twitch for us.
Yes, but I don't remember how, after 50 years, things get a little fuzzy.
I have a question. Where'd you put the cattle on the railroad cars?
Here in Newcastle.
In Newcastle.
Yes, the big stockyard. You remember where the old mill used to be?
Oh, yeah, I've read about
there.
it. But my dad used to talk a lot about trailing cows to Dewey, South Dakota to put on the train.
And I have a picture of the Dewey, South Dakota, if you'd like to see it.
Sure.
I'd like to see that.
How long did it take you to get the cows to cow camp? When you took cows and calves?
He was my teacher.
When you trailed the cows and calves to cow camp, was it 3 days?
No, it seems to me if we got a good drive on them, about a day and long now. And the hardest part was going up, you had to get them up on the top, and trying to get them up there, they were tired of walking, and you had that was the only way up, and they wanted to go on sideways.
Day and a half if the heel flies left you alone. And if you had heel flies, it was 4 days.
Did you always overnight at Fred Martin's?
Yeah.
Gene.
Well, I can't locate that thing.
Hey, Gene,
Sorry.
you said a teacher worked you over with a switch, and her name was Miss Hathaway. Miss Hathaway? Was that Isla Hathaway? Was that her name? Isla Hathaway?
Yeah, I don't know. I don't remember what her, just Miss Hathaway, and I remember doggone her enjoying the third grade, and if she didn't up and married some guy.
Hey Gene, how long have you guys had that Hereford place up there? Have you always had that as a go-between?
No. Charlie Hereford had that. And the fella before that was, old fella, I don't know, shoot. Anyway, and those are the two guys I know. We bought it from Charlie. And that's a holdover when we come down from the mountains there. That and then Valdez place across is another holdout. You know, we bought that place from Valdez boy for $17 an acre.
Wow.
Think of the tax if you want to sell it.
When did you
We
get the
missed.
homesteads on the limestone? Was that one by one, or what, did you get them all
One
at
by
the same
one.
time?
Yes, if a person had a homestead and wanted to get out of the business, we tried to buy it. And I don't know, I think we got 12 of them up there now.
Were you adult when that was happening, or was that long, long ago that you got the homesteads?
Well, I knew about that. I was adult.
What about the homesteads on Blacktail? Don once was telling me about a lot of homesteads on Blacktail that are not a part.
There were, and my dad bought those if they wanted to sell 50 cents an acre. And everybody said, gee, that guy's crazy, lock him up. But 50 cents. And Avery's and, gee, there are several of them. But they couldn't make it because there wasn't any water. You know, if you don't have water, you don't have anything. That's all there is to it. Remember, Bob Van Avery was my very good friend here, and he was also the best pool player in town at one time. And you know what? He always chose me as his partner. Now, why in the world would choose some guy that couldn't make a straight in that far for your partner? Well, he said, listen, all you've got to do is hook the guy behind you. That is, if there are 2 balls here, or 3, you've got to fix it so the guy that's going to shoot can't hit the other ball. See, that's called hooking. And so I was pretty good at that because I couldn't do anything else. And we'd play for a dime now, mind you. A dime a game. And that was a pretty big price. Pretty hot game. We'd probably get arrested if the president and the sheriff know about it.
I got one more question. How many years did you take cattle down the railroad to Omaha or wherever?
Quite a few. It seemed like they were hauling cattle in the 30s at least, and probably the last load of cows went out in the 50s.
How long was the trip?
Long. It's about 510 miles from the old mill to South Omaha. And we'd get a switch engine from Gillette, would come down and bring some stock cars to load. And they'd haul them down and put them in front of the depot. And we'd go in the stock yards with the cattle. There was a big holding pen for the whole herd. And we'd cut off maybe 50, 100 head and put them in an alleyway. And then Harold Mankey he rode a big old white horse. I remember that. He would sort them one by one. And of course, the corral had a lot of gates for pens. and each pen was assigned to a ranch, MW here, double triangle here, M bar over here. Harold had cut a critter out, holler, MW! And the guy that's running the MW gate swing it out in the alleyway and catch the critter. And so we do that till we got them all sorted. Now you had to have 40,000 pounds for a load. And you could get a trailer. If it came out, you had enough for a whole car and then maybe half of another. They'd sell you a trailer. And I remember this big old engine would come and pick up 4 cars. We could load 2 at a time. Pull them down, they push them down in there to where the chute fit the car door. And before they got there, they had about 5 or 6 guys with section hands and a big pile of sand. And as the car went by, these guys would shovel sand through the door of the car to give footing for the cattle, because it get awful mushy in there, you know. And if something got down, why, it couldn't get stomped on. So we leave here. Well, one night we left about just a little before sundown, and we all rode in the caboose. There were, maybe 8 or 10 fellows in the caboose, and it was pretty crowded. And we started off, and we got out down the track several miles, and I went out, and Glenn McCoy went with me, and Fred Fawcett. We went out to the back of the caboose just to see what was going on. When we got out there a ways, Fred took his cowboy hat off and waved it like that. And Glenn McCoy said, "Hey, Fred, why are you doing that? Nobody can see you. Claire can't see you." And he said, "Well, I told Clara I'd wave to her when we went by, so And then we'd get to Omaha about 5 o'clock, not Omaha, Alliance, about 5 o'clock in the morning. And there was a big hotel up away from the tracks a little ways. And the conductor would say, "Well, you boys can go up there, we'll be here a while, and you can wash up and eat there." So we'd all troop up there, and where we washed up, it must have been a place for the railroad men to wash up. It must have been an end of a division. And they had several sinks and urinals and so on. Well, we'd rush back because we didn't want to lose the train. And some foresighted fella would buy a case of beer and bring it down. And we'd put it, the railroad put an ice deal in a box, and we'd throw most of the ice out, but leave enough to do good for the beer, and have that. Now, my dad and Fred Fawcett were smarter than the rest of them, because they always missed the train. And so when they missed the train, they'd go to the depot and holler and say, "What's the big idea? They're leaving us here, yap. Well, the upshoot was that you could ride the passenger train. The depot, the ticket guy would say, "Now listen, you're gonna catch up with the stock train, and at the next stop point, you get off and get back on the stock train. Oh, yeah. You betcha, thank you. They get into Omaha about 5:30 in the afternoon. And we'd get in there 2:30 in the morning. Pretty smart.
Hey Gene, did they ever unload them cattle and water them, feed them, or you went straight through?
No, one time we got to Lincoln and we had an hour left before 36 hours. Every 36 hours you've got to unload stock and feed and water. Well, gee whiz, that's short, what is it, 60 miles from Omaha to Lincoln? That's another bunch of money to water feed them. So they said, no, we can't make it. You only got an hour, we gotta get an engine in here, yap. And somebody said, listen, Mac, if you don't get that train out of here, there's gonna be 8 guys come in here and tear this joint up. You know, in about 15 minutes, we had a locomotive.
So did you play that game every time you went? For those 20 years you were going to Omaha?
What's that?
Did they play, did you say that the whole time, each trip to Omaha?
Sure, why not?
Well, you would have thought they would have gotten a...
Yeah. No, you know, it wasn't really fair. That was the only vacation the ranchers had. The cow camp was fun, but there was work to stay there. But getting on the train and you get to Omaha and you get a motel room, a real nice hotel room, you eat catfish, that was the best thing to eat in the hotel. Big old catfish like that. And the poor women were staying home. That really wasn't fair. But then we didn't have women's libs.
They were probably glad you were just gone.
Yeah, that's what I was thinking.
It's like, just go ahead, go elk hunting, get out of my way, please, I got things to do.
Well, now maybe that's why there's so many divorces today. There ain't no trip to Omaha.
Hey Gene, do you have any idea when the last cattle train went through here?
No, I sure don't.
I think it could have been in the late 60s. I was working out of Edgemore, and I used to see them come through there going there in the late 60s. You'd hear cattle ball, and they'd come out of Montana and stuff.
Yes.
Probably about the late, and then sort of stockyards out there.
Oh yeah, was it a pretty big herd?
I helped load some sheep out there on the train back in the 60s. I don't think they shipped any cattle.
Yeah.
So, Gene,
I can remember.
so was it always October, November when you took your calves to Omaha?
Was what?
Was it always in October and November when you took your calves to Omaha?
Yeah.
Yeah. And so you ran into some snow along the way sometimes? Or?
No, see, we went, the cow camp guys, Beaver Creek Cattle Association, wanted to be on the market the first Monday after Labor Day. And so that's pretty good weather. So that worked out pretty. And they always planned the roundup a couple of weeks before the first of November.
So the permits, so your permits are a lot shorter. The permits on the mountain must have been a lot shorter then, because that's a month off the length of the permits then, if you had to leave in early September.
Well, see, if you got homesteads up there, you have to get off the 1st of October. But if it's not snowed out, why, we can put those cows in a homestead until the grass or water runs out, see? So we don't have to come down right after the season.
So what went on the train? You sorted the cows and calves and brought just the calves to the train?
No, just the cows.
Just the cows?
Yeah.
So they went off the 1st of
And,
September?
well, no, I'm sorry. It was the calves. The yearlings, yes. Drove the cows home. Yes.
Do you know, did the MW brand come with the ranch?
Yes, it did.
Do you have any idea what it means?
And we often wondered where it got there, how it got there. And like I say, Fred Fawcett said, well, he thought that brand came up from Texas with the cattle. And it's a very nice brand. It's a good brand, isn't it, Scott?
It is.
Because it's a one-iron brand. You can put the end down, turn it over, and brand the W, say, like, well, if you wanted to brand, well, say AU7, for example. You got the A, you gotta go get the U, you gotta go get the 7. By then, they're all cold.
Hey Gene, what did you ship? They were probably 2 or 3 year old stuff you shipped to Omaha, wasn't it?
Well, now that's a good question. My dad had some yearlings that he didn't sell for some reason. I don't know. It turned out pretty well. But he kept them till they were 2, see, and they were pretty good size. And he still palmed them off as big yearlings. But most usually, you know, you'd go with them when they were ready.
Like at a yearling age.
Yeah.
It wasn't uncommon for people to run steers till there was 2 back then.
Yeah.
That was not uncommon at all. The calves only weighed about 300 pounds, so they kept them over and put more weight on them.
Yes. Yes. Well, that's what he did, and they sold pretty well. But he was laughing at the cow-calf, calling those 2-year-olds yearlings. Yes, you know, speaking of those cattle, at the cow camp, we always had fresh meat. We always had beef steak for breakfast every morning, beef steak and eggs. And the way it worked would be 3 or 4 guys that lived right around the camp, maybe 2 or 3 miles away or 5, would come up a week or so before the camp opened, and they'd ride out and pick the best heifer calf that they could find, a yearling. And they'd butcher it, and they'd hang it in the meat house at the cow camp, and they'd cut their own meat off of it, see? And the way they settled up for that was after they sold the calves, all the guys, they'd get the guys that were selling heifers, and they'd average the price of what their best heifers brought, and they'd figure out the weight of the one they butchered and pay them the best price that was available. It worked out pretty well. Pretty well. What's the matter?
No, that's good. I mean, that was fair. More than fair, huh?
Well, yeah, they tried to be, and you know, speaking of fair, the forest has had lots of fires. Down on Elk Mountain, for example, burned out 2 or 3 times. You know, I can remember being up there one day, and Shortly after noon, we were getting ready to go out and get the horses and go for a ride. Somebody saw some smoke. Right away, everybody dropped everything they were doing and tried to find some way to fight fire with. We jump into whatever outfits up there that would run and head out, and hell, we had the fire out in about 30 minutes. And so that was, oh, and one of these pictures of the old house, there was a picture of the U.S. official, U.S. government fire thing. What'd they call it, Rhonda? It was a fire box. It was about that wide. And oh, maybe that tall. And it had a couple, 3 shovels in it, and a rake or 2.
Hatchet.
And the axe and stuff.
Hatchet, yeah.
Little old red
And
fire
that
box.
little box was always up there at Cow Camp.
Yeah,
In
yes.
one building.
Yes, that came in handy that one time that we went. Yeah, was a lot of fun. The old cabin, the old house, the older fellas slept in the old house on the floor with the pack rats. And of course the roof leaked, but everybody had their bedroll, and the bedroll usually was enclosed in a big piece of canvas, you know, folded over. And they'd sleep there. The real tough guys would take their sleeping bags and sleep outside. And us dumb kids, we'd go in the barn, clean out a stall and put our sleeping bags in there. Then the younger fellas would sleep, they used to put up hay up there, remember? They used to cut hay and fill the hay mow in the barn. And a lot of times there'd be some hay left, make a nice bed, and they'd stay up there.
I didn't remember any of it, but my family, the Stearns, talked about it, you know.
Yes.
Bill and his dad.
Yes, yes, it was a fine place, and you know, when it comes right down to it, those people were an important part of this community because they paid taxes here. They bought groceries here, they bought cow feed here, they bought a lot of things here. And we had at one time a 4th of July celebration. Look at the people that were there. Yes. Those were people, most of those were townspeople. Bernard Howe, you remember Bernard Howe?
Yeah.
He was there. Dr. Wells was there. And we had a big celebration. People brought, I guess you'd call it potluck now. Everybody brought something. People brought a little beer to cheer things up. And I remember a cowboy by the name of Ernest Van Buren. You remember Ernest Van Buren? Ernest wasn't one of my best friends because my wife Jane was a nurse. And she told me several times that Ernest would be in the hospital and he couldn't wait but to tell her what an ornery kid I was. And Ernest had a child, Keith Van Buren. And one thing I remember, there was a great big pole that held up one side of the barn, where the gate going into the barn was. And Keith carved these initials, KVB, very deeply in
They're
there.
still there in that photo.
Yes. As a matter of fact, the old barn fell down a number of years ago. But we had some friends come visit us from St. Paul, Nebraska. And they wanted to see the cow camp because one of their fathers had worked for us for 27 years. So I took them up there. And I looked for that KVDV. And by George, it so happened when the barn fell over, that big pole landed face up, and there was his signature. Yes, gee whiz. And the guys had a lot of fun up there. Some of it turned a little vicious. One time, Albert Herford. Now, if you know Albert Herford, he was some kind of an ordinary fellow once in a while, but a good guy, you know what I mean?
Can't anger us, must be.
Well, 3 or 4 of the boys decided they were going to come to town, have a little fun after supper. Well, they left and we all went to bed. And Albert got in his sleeping bag and he was laying out in front of the old house. Well, the boys came home and they were happy to see Albert, but he wasn't happy to see them, you know. They decided Albert ought to have a drink. So they ran over and cabbaged him in his bedroll, opened his mouth and dang near drowned him with bourbon. So that was the big fun.
He was a pretty ornery guy, wasn't he, Gene?
Yes, he was.
He was a heck of a good hand and a really dependable person. He worked for us when he got real old, and boy, you could count on. He got drunk in town one time while we were down in Texas at a rodeo, and RC was living here, and he went up there. He said the jail called him and said, "Come and this Al Herford says you'll bail him out, and we want you to come and get him the heck out of here because he's threatening to tear this place down because he's got to go out to Centric's and take care of the livestock. And they're dependent on him, and they're way down in El Paso." RC laughed. He went over and bailed him out and took him home so he could do the chores.
Well, it takes all kinds.
He was going to take care of it come hell or high water. That was all. He was always like that.
Yes. Van Buren, that's 4th of July deal. They saddled up a horse with the buck and put a flank on him, and everybody gathered around the corral, and they turned out Van on this bucking horse, and he rode him for a little bit, you know, and that was the celebration.
My father-in-law said that Van Buren saved his life up there towards the cow camp. One time he had a real green horse and he was getting him handled and trying to ride him and thought he had a pretty good handle on him and he could turn him or anything, and all of a sudden something, white-tail buck sprung up or something and spooked his horse, and he started running right straight for the cliffs that run alongside of Beaver Creek. And those big old steep rocks over there where it's just, you know, way to the bottom. Yes. And he said, Father Stern said, I was saying my prayers because I thought I was going off over the edge. And he said Van Buren was right beside me, and he said, I thought, well, the fool's going to kill himself too. But he said he grabbed my horses, reached over and grabbed the cheek of the bridle and whirled his horse back. And he said both of us, he said that the dirt from our horses slid and just went off, and he said, I know I wouldn't be alive today if it wasn't. And Van Buren was risking his life because they could have both gone over and died. But Van was that kind of a guy.
Gee whiz, well, we got a lot of wild stories. Yeah.
Thank you.
Well, you know now, Gunsmoke's gonna be on.
Thank you, Gene.